right, hello again, everyone, and thank you so much for being with me. I'm Frederica Whitfield. All right, happening right now, live pictures of Boston, bracing for a lot of people coming together with different issues and different ideas in mind for these dueling protests. Boston Mayor Marty Walsh meeting with counter protesters this morning, at one point hugging a Black Lives Matter leader and then tweeting this: "I ask everyone to be peaceful today and respect our city. Love, not hate. We stand together against intolerance." We have teams on the ground there in Boston. First, let's get to CNN's Polo Sandoval. So, Polo, you are following the free speech rally, and there have been people who have already culminated there. This is different from the throngs of people we have been seeing marching through the streets of Boston. So, help describe what's happening there at that park with that free speech rally. We are so sorry about that. While you can see him clearly and you can see what's being described as a counter-protest clearly in Boston, we cannot hear Polo, so we're going to try and get back to him. Meantime, our Sarah Seidner. Oh, sorry about that. Not going to Sarah Seidner yet either. All right, so let's talk about these dueling protests. It's very It's very early in the process to really know what is at hand and what is going to take place, what the focus is. But I do have a panel with me now, if we can talk further about what is going to transpire here. Joining me right now, Tim Weiss, an anti-racism writer, activist, and author of several books on race in America. Alicia Brooks with the Southern Poverty Law Center. She is also the director of the Civil Rights Memorial Center. CNN's national reporter for race and inequality, Tanzina Vega. And joining me by phone, former skinhead and author of the book My Life After Hate, Arno Michaelis. All right, thanks so much for all of you for being able to join me. So, Tim, let me begin with you, because while we are seeing what appear to be hundreds of people descending on downtown Boston, we're hearing everything about dueling rallies, one about free speech, the other about peace and love. It really is difficult to discern what the messages will be from these dueling rallies and why they are considered dueling rallies. Free speech is very American, and you know, the pursuit of peace and love also very American. So, Tim, help us understand, what do you believe is transpiring here?
Well, first of all, let's be clear. The so-called free speech rally is not some abstract rally for free speech. The people who were initially invited, many of whom have since pulled out, to be speakers at the so-called free speech rally, it's not like they invited the head of the ACLU or people whose job it is to actually safeguard free speech in the courts. The people they invited were people with a history of blatantly racist, blatantly anti-Semitic rhetoric, people who deny the Holocaust happened, people who praise Adolf Hitler, people who want a white ethno-state. So they're hiding behind the cloak of free speech, which they do have constitutionally, but they're making it sound as if that's their only cause. That's like Confederates, for instance, and neo-Confederates making the Civil War about states' rights in the abstract, conveniently ignoring the fact that the states' right they were actually fighting for was the right to own other human beings. So I think it's a smokescreen, first of all, that we need to understand on that side.
So, Arno, given that you know, you are a former skinhead and author of the book My Life After Hate, and you're on the phone with us now, is that your interpretation or best understanding of what this Boston Free Speech Coalition is all about? It describes itself as a coalition of libertarians, progressives, conservatives, and independents. This Boston Free Speech Coalition is the one that is holding this demonstration at downtown in the Boston Common area. But what's your understanding about whether this name, free speech, is indeed a facade, what the real intention is here?
I entirely agree with my old buddy Tim. Tim, how you doing?
Good, man.
It's absolutely a smokescreen, and I agree 100%. If this rally was really about free speech, then let's have the ACLU there, and let's have other social thought that's sometimes a target of people who want to censor things. So considering that the content of the rally is all far-right, white supremacist, as Tim pointed out, Holocaust deniers, really vile sentiments that are intended to cultivate fear and hate and strife in our society. By all means, those people do have the right to say those things, and I would defend their right. I respect the ACLU for defending the right to march in Charlottesville. I think it's really important, and hopefully this is the way it's shaken down today, is that the counter-protest demonstrates, first of all, that the fear being espoused by the right is unfounded, and second of all, that diversity and humanity and love and human kinship is a far better way to live your life, and that it's not only possible, but it's happening as we speak.
So, Arno, what is your concern, or what are your thoughts that this demonstration would be taking place, and as you described, what you believe the spirit behind the Boston Free Speech Coalition to be, this happening 1 week after Charlottesville, Virginia, leading to the death of one woman? So what are your thoughts and concerns today, 1 week later?
My biggest concern is that violence breaks out again and people get hurt. Not only because I don't want anyone to be hurt, but because that kind of violence plays directly into the hands of the neo-Nazis, of the so-called alt-right, the so-called white nationalists. Any kind of aggression that they can provoke serves their purpose. And even if somehow they all got beaten horribly and were chased off, that would be a victory for them as well, because now they feel like martyrs. They would feel like they're standing up against these incredible odds, and it would continue to cultivate sympathy for their cause in a broader sense in our society. So my concern is that their aggression would be reflected, and fortunately it looks like there's some really amazing leadership in Boston as far as the counter-protest is concerned, and hopefully we can avoid that.
And so, Alicia, you with the Southern Poverty Law Center, you've been monitoring hate groups for a very long time, helping people to get a better understanding about named groups, some duplicitous identities that many have. You heard Arno talking about why some of these groups might be looking for any kind of aggression, any means in which to provoke them, and it best serves their cause. It helps to cultivate, more sympathies. So explain to us what you're seeing in the behavior, perhaps, or the strategy of some of these hate groups or extreme groups. It's difficult to know what to call them, but so I'll let you, place the best label these days. But what are your greatest concerns, or what have you learned about the change in strategy or the modifications that some of these groups have been making based on, the climate of this country?
Thank you. What we're seeing strategy-wise is what we saw in Charlottesville. The coalition of different white supremacist groups, and that's what they are, white supremacist organizations who have come together to position themselves or make it look like they're victims of free speech, or they're victims of a push for democracy and diversity and inclusion. They seek out, as Arno and Tim mentioned, attention. They want to wrap themselves in the cloak of free speech so that they can continue to speak out and have people believe that whites in this country are under assault. And that is their strategy.
And that there are hundreds of people who have turned out in of what we're being told is described as a counter-protest. Is it your concern, Alicia, that this group, as you describe, cloaking itself, with the viewpoint of they're only there for free speech, that they might be looking for an opportunity to be provoked?
Absolutely, absolutely. If they were people of goodwill, or they were good people, as the president tried to suggest last week, they would have canceled this so-called free speech rally today out of respect for the loss of life that happened in Charlottesville and all those that were injured, but they did not do that. I want to applaud the peaceful protesters that came out, also exercising their free speech rights to say no and take a strong stand against hate and white supremacy.
Okay, so Arno, Tim, and Alicia, hold on a moment, because I want to go to Sarah Seidner, who is there in Boston, and she is there where many of these, what are being called counter-demonstrators, right? People who are marching through downtown Boston, where they eventually will be trying to convey their message to this group calling itself the Free Speech Coalition. Sarah?
They're actually out here to convey their message to the city, the country, and the world, and that includes those that are going to be taking part in that free speech rally at Boston Common. There are thousands of people here. We're watching the crowd as it walks by. This was organized mostly by Black Lives Matter, but you will notice that the crowd is extremely diverse. There are as many white folks here as there are anybody else, and they have all sorts of different kind of signs like "hate has no place here." You will also notice that it is very peaceful, it is very calm. People are chanting. They are here in solidarity with those who, the one person who lost her life as a result of being hit by a car there in Charlottesville, but also they want the country to see that they will not put up with this sort of racist rhetoric that has been used in some of these alt-right marches. You are really seeing a real sense of this city and the people in this city. There are people from all over, but a lot of these folks are from right here in Boston, and they have all sorts of different messages, but their main message is that racism and white supremacy has absolutely no place in America.
All right, Sarah, thank you so much. And so back with my panel, you know, Tim and Arnaud and Lecia. And Arnaud, if I could invite you back in. I know you're on the phone with us, but as a former skinhead and author of the book My Life After Hate, I want to keep reminding people because they're not seeing you and they may be hearing your name for the first time as well, Arnaud. So this opportunity that this free speech coalition has taken, what do you believe their primary objective is? To gather at the Boston Common, to, in the words of Lecia, saying they're cloaking themselves with this, free speech objective here. What do you believe the main mission is here? What are they up to?
I think that's a really important question. Anytime you're in a conflict, understanding your opponent's objective is key. And there are a number of objectives that the so-called free speech rally is going after. One is to cultivate fear and strife in our society. The more people who are afraid, the more ripe they are for recruitment into that kind of ideology. And their second objective, which is the same objective of any sort of violent extremist group, it's the same objective that the so-called Islamic State tries to provoke, is that they want to sound like they speak for all white people. Right. In the same way that the so-called Islamic State wants to say that they speak for all Muslims, the alt-right, the people behind the free speech rally want to say that they are speaking for the majority of white people or all white people. And that's why I'm very heartened to see that white people are turning out for these counter-protests and saying, look, they don't speak for me. This is not what I think America is all about. This is not the kind of society I want my children to grow up in. And it's crucial that white people, along with everyone else, make that point.
And so, Tim, while we're looking at images of the counter demonstrators, as Sarah, described, are organized to meet the message of the Free Speech Coalition with, a sense of unity, and they're there in solidarity of the young lady, Heather Heyer, who was killed in Charlottesville last week. Does this demonstration, particularly and that it's in Boston, does this in any way also convey another message, show that extremist groups, if we want to call that free speech coalition an extremist group, if they are emboldened, if other groups like it are emboldened, if there is a sense of a greater freedom in which to exhibit this feeling?
Well, I hope that the counter-protesters will demonstrate, particularly the white ones who have decided to act in solidarity with people of color who are always under the heel of white supremacy, not just from Nazis and the folks like the ones in Charlottesville, but from a systemic inequality that continues to plague the country. I hope that white folks will continue to act in that way to demonstrate that there is a different way to live in this skin that we have, that one doesn't have to throw down on the side of white supremacy. But listen, unless those white folks are also going to join with Black Lives Matter, who helped to organize that demo in Boston, when folks are killed unjustly by law enforcement, unless they're going to protest inequities in healthcare, unless they're going to protest inequities in wealth and income, and all of those areas where people of color continue to suffer structural white supremacy, then I'm afraid we're not doing enough. We have to be there to fight overt white supremacy, and we have to be there to fight systemic white supremacy and demonstrate that racism is not only not going to be tolerated when it comes from Nazis, but it's not going to be tolerated when it comes from the president. It's not going to be tolerated when it comes from law enforcement. It's not going to be tolerated when it comes from landlords or teachers or anyone else in this country.
All right, we'll leave it right there as we continue to look at the live images out of Boston for these dueling demonstrations. Tim Weiss, Arno Michaelis, Alicia Brooks, and Sarah Seidner also for being with us. Thanks to all of you. We're continuing to follow the dueling rallies in Boston, where thousands have descended on the city there. Stay with us.